I hate starting things. Hello, my name's Dr. Len Zadell. I'm Associate Dean of Science, Faculty of Science. And welcome to our first research forum as part of Research Week. Before we start, I'll just give the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunavut and Nunatunukovit and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province, and we wish for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Like I said, this is the first Faculty of Science Research Forum, so we're kind of experimenting with it and seeing how it's going to work out. I'm excited to see as many people participating as there are today. The overall goal of Research Week is to celebrate, wait for it, research, and make visible a lot of things that happen at the university that aren't always obvious, especially to undergraduate students. Our vision in hosting this forum is to make students aware of some of the research activities and be aware that they can participate in some of them. For junior undergraduates, there are research opportunities, summer placements that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And for senior students, they might actually see opportunities for, going into graduate studies if they're so inclined. So how I'm going to run this today is we're fortunate enough to have Dr. Amy Supernant, who's the Dean of Graduate Studies, and be able to present on some general comments on that. We have Nicole Babbitt, who's one of our Faculty of Science grants facilitators, who's going to talk about those summer student placement programs, the USRAs and the SURAs. And I'll let her describe that and see how you can get confused between those two. And then we'll get directly to the research presentations. So with that, I'll ask Dr. Supernant to please come up and share a few words.
Okay, thank you, Len. Welcome to everyone to Research Week, and thank you very much for the Faculty of Science for giving me a few minutes here. I'll try not to take up too much time. I did break the rules, and I've got 4 slides instead of just 1. But first I want to talk to the undergraduates in the room about, and maybe master's students if there are any, about why you might want to go to graduate school in general. So the research shows that there is, in fact, something called a wage gap. And what that wage gap is the difference between a person in income, between a person who has a high school degree and a person who has an undergrad degree, a person who has a high school degree and a master's degree, a person who has a high school degree and a doctoral degree. What we find is that the wage gaps on average are increase with the more education that you have. And the kind of interesting thing is that in Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador has the largest wage gap between those with a high school degree, undergrad, master's, and PhD. So you might think going to graduate school would be a good thing because it will, on average, increase your income. Income isn't everything in life, we hope. And so my goals for grad students here at this university and every university is for them to be happy. And there is, in fact, a positive correlation between number of years of education and happiness. And it's actually quite linear, it goes up and up and up. So a person with an undergraduate degree is, on average, happier than a person with a high school degree. A person with a master's degree is, on average, happier, et cetera, et cetera. This is, of course, confounded with a lot of other things, and so correlation doesn't imply causation, but there at least is a positive relationship between those things. People with more education tend also to be healthier. They give more to charity. They vote. They participate in community groups more than people without education. So my take-home line is to go to graduate school. It will make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. Can you go to the next slide, please? Why Memorial University? Oh, I did have animation. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Perfect. Oh, got it. Okay. I should have checked the animation beforehand. So the School of Graduate Studies at Memorial University has over 100 diploma, master's, and PhD programs from pretty much everything that you can think of. Arts, humanities, social sciences. We have quite a few professional programs. We have, as you are going to hear about today, a lot of areas in the sciences, and we have many interdisciplinary programs, some in science, some in other areas, and we even have an interdisciplinary PhD program where you can pretty much build your own program. So that's Memorial University, and if you just go to the next slide, please. And we've got great students. Keep going through. And that's it. We try to promote them as much as possible. And so if you come to graduate school, we'll put your face in the Gazette if you do some great things. So we have the most amazing students here at MUN. Okay, last slide. So I have an enormous amount of information on how to apply to graduate school. Everything is on the SGS website. But each one of these tabs, step 1, accept the offer of admission. Step 2, apply for a study permit, et cetera, has a lot of information behind it. So if you're interested in how to apply to graduate school, we've got videos on how to ask for letters of recommendation. We've got lots and lots of lists and lists of how to apply and what you might end up doing while you're in graduate school. So all of our contact information is here. The sgs@mun.ca email is read every single day, and we try to respond to all student queries within 2 business days. So thank you very much for your time, and I will turn it back to Lynn. So I took 4 minutes.
Thank you, Amy. And 4 slides. Look at that. The animations were cheating, though, you know. Right, okay. Before we get started, I was going to mention a few things about Faculty of Science. So, Nicole, please. Faculty of Science, I mean, I stole this sort of from our, you know, the propaganda in the website. The mandate is accessible teaching for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And that's often what most people see as the front face of the university. But as well, we have a mandate to do research, and that's what we're going to focus on a bit more today. And that's not always as obvious, and people aren't always aware of what we're doing. People often say, oh, faculty member, oh, so you get the summer off. Oh, no. That's when I get to get some work done. So, you know, it's a balance, and both things are important. So, next slide, please. We have 9 departments, and you'll be aware of most of these departments. You know, you got biology, chemistry, physics, and physical oceanography, which are standard departments in any university, really. Maybe people aren't as aware of the ocean sciences department, so that's our list. On top of that, we have 5 interdisciplinary programs. So those are programs that kind of exist between the departments and have courses in multiple departments. They only exist at the graduate level, so you may not be aware of them, but if you're interested in interdisciplinary studies, they're there and available and can be very interesting, and they're really neat packages. Next slide, please. What we do. We bring in about $28 million a year in external research funding. So that's money coming into the province, into the university, just because of research activity by faculty members. It says $150K per faculty member per year. So I'd like to get a bit more of that action. Or some people are really rich. There's 267 grants per year. We have 2 grants facilitators. Nicole is here. She'll be talking in a few seconds. And they have a lot of work to do. kind of managing and getting these grants in and organized. 1.4 per faculty member per year. So a lot. Next slide, please. Oh, dear. This is you, Nicole. Okay, so that's just the background on Faculty of Science I thought I'd bring. And now we have Nicole Babbitt to talk a little bit about some of the summer student programs you might want to be aware of.
Hello. So in addition to a clicker, I also run the summer undergraduate research program. So we have 2 programs in the Faculty of Science that are for undergraduates only, and you have to be a Bachelor's of Science student for some of them, but not all. So the Undergraduate Student Research Award is actually run by the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada. This is a competitive program to get undergraduate students interested in research, to get them experience in labs, and to get them interested in graduate school. We also run in the Faculty of Science our own program called the Student Undergraduate Research Award. So just a slightly different acronym. It's the exact same program. However, it's funded by the Faculty of Science. Still is just as prestigious, still an academic award. This difference between the two is that USRAs are only open to Canadian citizens and permanent residents. However, our internal SURA program is open to international and Canadian citizens. You apply to both programs through the same process. We're going to be advertising it soon. Our deadline is going to be Monday, February 3rd, but we're going to release information about the competition at the beginning of December, so you can start applying as soon as the information is released, and we'll be emailing all the different departments about it. So the programs are 16 weeks of paid employment in a faculty member's research lab. You get about $4,500 from NSERC and topped up by the supervisor as well. So you're working with a faculty member specifically in the Faculty of Science. However, for the USRA awards, you can also work with a faculty member in medicine. However, there are a limited number of awards, and the process, we require you to indicate that you want to work in medicine. So you can work in any of the departments that were listed above. If you hear about our supervisor today that you're interested in working with, you can certainly apply to work with them through one of these programs. You don't have to have a supervisor in mind when you apply, but it's good to have an area that you're interested in, for example, chemistry or physics. And you're welcome to see the website there. We're going to be updating the information in the next couple weeks, or email me if you have any more questions about the USRA or SURA programs. I also wanted to note that there's the MUSET program. You may not be familiar with it, but we don't run it through the Dean of Science or the Faculty of Science. However, that's another way to get experience working in research labs and to get some contacts with different faculty members.
Thank you, Nicole. Okay, so now we come to the part of the program you've all been waiting for. We'll start with presentations. The way we're going to run this is we've boldly limited faculty members to 1 slide each, and I told them they have 90 seconds, but we'll see how that works out. For the speakers, we have a timer. You can see where I'm going with this. The timer goes to 2 minutes. And we'll get really agitated once you start going way over on that, but maybe the rest of the audience will as well. Following the presentations, just to sort of, don't drift out after your favorite faculty member speaks, oh, I'm last, there won't be a problem. There's some tables downstairs. Some of the departments have put up kind of show and tells. If you want to talk to, specific departments, find out about their programs. And as well, the Ocean Frontiers Institute, which is a large research program studying ecosystem change, sustainable ocean economy, things like that. They had, we're looking for a venue to show off some of their wares, so they're down there and you can talk to them as well. So they're down there as well, and there's rumor of cookies. So that's after the presentations. Now I think we'll start off. Who's first? And we'll see how this works out. There. What? Yeah. Yes, I know. Where's she? It's kind of like the magic saber. Go ahead, you're on.
Okay.
Get her time. She's going to go long.
Okay. All right. I'm starting at 4 seconds. Let's see if I can still come in under 2 minutes. Okay, so my name is Alison Malcolm. I'm from the Earth Sciences Department, and I have two aspects to my research program. I work on computational problems, that's what you see on the right, and I work in seismic imaging. So these are big data problems with lots of data, and we work on trying to move that to a tractable size so that we can apply all the fun computational techniques you may or may not have heard of, and still be able to apply them on our huge data sets, but really by focusing in on the part of the data set that we're most interested in. So that's the computational aspect of my work. The laboratory scale aspect of my work, I work on rock physics problems of understanding how rocks work and how rocks respond to large forcing. And so the way that we do this is actually by sending two waves and mixing them inside a rock. So if you like throw rocks in a pond, they make like circles. You imagine if you throw a really big rock or two really big rocks, the circles might bounce off of each other. You'll get the water kind of reflecting off of itself. And so that's what we do with acoustic waves in rocks. And this has implications for how the Earth responds to, in particular, large earthquakes, and how the Earth recovers from large earthquakes, and also to how we find both fractures and fluids in the subsurface. It's typically fractures and fluids that we're looking for, both for resources, but also they play a large role in earthquakes, as well as in any sort of storage of fluids or waste in the subsurface. So that's a little bit about what I do, and there you go. I'm under time.
Great job. Hey, no, we haven't met.
No, we haven't.
Pleasure.
You met my wife, though, apparently.
Yes, it's the way the world goes.
Hello, my name is Pierre Paul B. I'm from the Department of Psychology, and I'm associated with the Cognitive and Behavioral Ecology program. So that's a graduate program where we use skills from anybody on campus, really, to study, in our context, what animals can see, what they can perceive, and what they do with the information that they gather from their environment. And so I just started about a year ago, and now I'm really working hard toward surrounding myself with people with different skill sets, people with mathematical background, people with biology background, people with engineering and computer science background, so that we can tackle these problems from different angles. And just as a taster, as an example of what we do in the lab, I'm giving examples of where we're using computer vision to answer questions about animal behavior. For example, I'm interested in studying social behaviors in nocturnal fish, so we're developing a 3D live tracking system to understand flock, or basically the school member interactions. We do that with birds as well. I'm also interested in looking at individual recognition in birds, but birds don't perceive their world the same way we do. So I give you an example here with puffins, where we take a picture in the regular red, green, and blue. We take a picture in the UV. We merge those together, and now we can build mathematical models that describe how these puffins look like to each other. And we start using computer vision tools now to identify unique features on this build that could be used for individual recognition. Now, I also study cognition, and in the department we have somebody that uses eye tracking software. So now we're starting to use that to determine how people, and therefore animals, can start detecting camouflaged features in their landscape. It's a lot easier to ask a person than to ask an animal what they can see. So we're really interested in students that have an interdisciplinary background that would like to learn more about animal behavior.
Thank you. Who's that? Oh, Annie, you're on.
All right, so my name is Annie Mercier. I'm with the Department of Ocean Sciences. So we're located in Logie Bay, so actually off campus. For those of you who have not been, I'm hoping that you will come. We're right by the ocean. And obviously I work with marine animals, mainly benthic organisms, so those that live on the bottom, on the seafloor. And the kind of the areas that we look at are deep sea biology. So we do have live deep sea animals in the lab. They're quite popular with the visitors. We're happy to show them off. We actually study their behavior, their reproduction, how they interact with each other. We're doing also all sorts of marine conservation, so of deep sea coral and sponge beds, for instance, as well as for the species that are being exploited commercially. We're looking at environmental stressors, so the big questions of climate change obviously come up. So how do these marine organisms react to ocean acidification or ocean warming? So we have experimental arenas for that. And I'm interested in aspects of fisheries and aquaculture. So this segment is mostly around sea cucumbers. So tropical and cold water sea cucumbers, we look at how they're fished and aquacultured as well. So what we use, so some students go at sea, use ROV, collect samples and whatnot. Other students are carrying out experimental studies. So we have a lot of aquariums, tanks and setups. And so there's a lot of behavioral and reproductive trials. We also use video and image analysis, microscopy, histology, and we combine this with biochemical analyses of lipids, fatty acids, stable isotopes to, for instance, look at food webs. Currently, we have one honors, one USEP student, so kind of a trainee that's part-time but paid in the lab undergrad. So whenever these positions come up, I do encourage you to apply. And we have 4 MSc, 1 PhD, and 1 postdoc, and we're welcoming anyone who's got interest in those topics. We do have volunteers from time to time, so inquiries welcome with the email or through the website. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Annie. We just noticed we didn't put the lighting in this room is kind of weird. It's computer controlled. If you push one of those buttons on the wall, like, the light switch on the wall, you'd expect the lights to be controlled. No, weird things happen. So we're going to try presentation mode.
That was presentation. Let's lecture. Let's see what happens. If it's...
Oh, that's
better?
Oh, yeah.
Can you flick it back for a second for Annie's?
Yeah, Annie, I noticed with Annie's in particular. Like, yeah, see? That's much better.
So read it real quick.
Okay. But these are going to be available afterwards anyway?
Yes. So don't be disappointed that there are not a lot of people here.
Yep.
I'm getting it recorded. I'm going to share it. So your time is not wasted.
Yes. Okay. And Colin. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm Colin Farquharson, Department of Earth Sciences. So I do computer modeling of geophysics with the main application to mining. So I'm trying to illustrate both of those things with the one diagram here. And so this is a very simplistic scenario where we have this vertical feature that could be a mineralized zone that we want to find and dig up and sell. We're wandering along the surface of the Earth with our transmitter loop. We've got an alternating current going through that transmitter loop, generates a magnetic field. Because we have that conductive feature down the ground, and it started off without any magnetic field in it, so it doesn't want any more magnetic field in it. So that deflects the magnetic field, and so that's all those colorful arrows that you see on this picture. Wonderful distortion down by the plate, including the shadow on this right-hand side, your right-hand side. It does make a small distortion to the magnetic field that we can measure on the surface on our geophysics. Those are the measurements we make, and we're trying to figure out and assess whether there is a great big conductive ore deposit down in the ground to dig up and sell. The other aspect about this picture is the computational aspect. This is a very simplistic model, not remotely like real geology. If you actually dig a hole in the ground, it is horrendously complicated, wonderfully complicated. We're developing computational math to try and calculate the electromagnetic fields down in the ground for nice complicated shapes, complicated geological features, so that we can then do quantitative interpretation of the measurements that we make along the surface of the Earth to try and, in some respects, a non-destructive testing of what's down in the ground. So yes, this is a picture from one of my PhD students, Shushan Liu, and yeah, computational geophysics. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you, Colin. Chris.
Not a slide.
We didn't.
Ha!
Or props allowed?
So my name's Chris Paducah, and I've got some props here. So for anyone, especially in the back, appreciate everyone who's not a professor who's here. Does anybody recognize what this arrangement of atoms is designed to represent? I hear whispers. Anyone? What if I told you they were carbon atoms? Coal. So it's very close. This is what graphite is. So basically, if you have carbon atoms and you arrange them in these kinds of sheets and then arrange them into layers, this is graphite. And graphite shows up in coal, right? Graphite also shows up in pencil lead. This one is all carbon atoms, but this is diamond. Now, you'd never mix diamond and graphite up, right? Graphite with these nice sheets, you smear it on a piece of paper, the sheets stick, great, no problem. But you try to do the same thing with diamond, we're getting work out here. You try to do the same thing with diamond, you just rip a hole in the paper. So part of the reason that happens is the way the atoms are arranged. So identical, all carbon, they behave totally differently. So I find this fascinating, and that's what drives a lot of my research here. And so it's physics and it's chemistry because we try to understand how materials are put together and how they change over time. And of course, we can't actually blow up all of our materials and look at them like this. We have to use other techniques. So we use things like X-rays. We also use visible light. We also use a lot of infrared light. It turns out infrared light's the right energy for vibrations in atoms. And we even go to much lower energies and look at acoustics. And so what I've shown you here are some examples of the applications and a bunch of words. If any of those look interesting to you, come find me afterwards. I'll also point out that there's a lot of people in the group. I'll highlight a few are undergrads. Matthew is an undergrad. Jocelyn is such a new undergrad. I don't even have her photo up there, but she gets involved, so you can get involved at absolutely any level. And come find me afterwards. And just remember, carbon is great.
Thank you, Chris. Mark Berry is next. Yes, you do. You're being recorded.
I hate microphones. Okay, so my work is largely human health related, and we are focused on a family of proteins that detect a series of very small molecules that are derived from amino acids. So those are referred to as trace amines. So this family of proteins that detect these, they're actually the first new pharmacological target for schizophrenia and drug abuse that has been identified in the last 30 or 40 years. That's where we started. What we're actually looking at now is why these proteins are in different body tissues other than the brain. So we've got projects looking at the implications for the variable amount of protein in different types of breast cancer. We're looking at the role of these proteins in controlling nutrient-induced hormone secretion, so diabetes. We have projects looking at the effects of the proteins in immune cells, because these trace amines, in addition to being synthesized by your body, they're also present in common foods, cheese, red wine, basically anything that's fermented and tastes nice. But they're also produced by the endogenous microbiota. So there may be a link there with microbiota human health. And then the last project we've got is some of this family are also present in your nose. And they appear to be involved in species-specific adaptation to environments. And so we're looking at the effects of these in behaviors induced by smell. And all of these publications were actually driven by undergrad students. That's it.
Thank you, Mark. Penny. Just recognize the peep.
Here's my name. There it is. Hello, everyone. I'm Penny Morrill from the Earth Science Department. I run a biogeochemistry lab, and my lab group name is DELTA, which stands for Diverse Environmental Laboratory, and Terrestrial Analog Studies. And as the name suggests, I have a very wide range of topics that we cover in my lab. In environmental geoscience, we're looking for methods to enhance CO2 sequestration and trying to mitigate climate change. We also do environmental remediation projects. On the planetary research side, we look at remote sensing, collecting data from drones and satellites. And additionally, we look at life in extreme environments, environments that are similar to what you would find on other planets and moons, trying to figure out how that life survives, and what biomarkers, chemical and isotopic life leaves behind, with the idea of helping to find or look for life on other planets. My research is funded by the Canadian Space Agency. I work with NASA, Canadian government, as well as NELCOR funds me. And my students go on to become either graduate students, they've also become environmental consultants, teachers, as well as exploration geologists. Because of the multidisciplinary nature of my topics or of my research, I recruit from not just earth sciences. I take biology students, biochemistry students, chemistry students, engineers. I take them all. And so if you're interested in either doing undergraduate work in my laboratory or graduate work, my website is up there at the top right-hand corner, and you can just click on the link that says Student Opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you. Who's next? Ron Haynes.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Ronald Haynes. I'm a professor in the mathematics department and also chair of the scientific computing graduate program, MSc and PhD programs. These are programs, one of the 5 interdisciplinary programs that Dr. Zadell mentioned at the beginning of the talk. So my primary research focus involves the design, implementation, and analysis of algorithms to solve mathematical problems on a computer. So a lot of the situations that we're talking about today, in some way, shape, or form, end up being described as mathematical models, and they're horribly, beautifully complex mathematical models where your by-hand techniques that you learn in first and second year mathematics no longer work. The models need to be simulated and approximated on computers, and one needs to make an appropriate choice of algorithms. Once one decides on an algorithm to do the approximation or simulation, those algorithms themselves can be studied theoretically to understand their complexity and their approximation properties. In the past, my research groups included many NSERC USRAs and SUR students, masters, PhD, and postdocs in scientific computing and mathematics. Who am I looking for? Not much, really. I just want students who have A's in calculus and linear algebra, differential equations, and programming. Pretty easy stuff. I've had great success in the past with my undergraduate students. I've had approximately 30 student co-authors over my career so far, and or industry placements. My students have gone on to become university professors and to work in various segments of industry. Let me know if you have any questions after.
Thank you. Amy Hereford.
Hi, so I'm Amy Hereford. I'm a joint appointment in both the biology department and in mathematics and statistics. And I do mathematical biology. At the moment, I'm also really keen on thinking of ways that we can make training in the biology undergraduate more quantitative. I called my lab Populations Plus, so we study population dynamics, but with something added to make it interesting. So this could be space, temperature, or evolution. So for temperature, these could be problems related to seasonality or climate change. An example of a project for undergraduate honors or summer research could be to try and come up with a mathematical model that explains why species can increase their ranges under climate warming. If anyone knows the answer or has a hypothesis they want to test, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to do. And Dr. Haynes mentioned horribly complex models. I mean, models are simplifications, so we take a great deal of pride in trying to figure out the right level of abstraction in our models so that they're not too complicated and difficult to analyze. And that's something that I really try to teach, is how to derive models that you can gain useful insights from while also having applied relevance. Another project could be related to if you're trying to control an infectious disease or eradicate a population and there's some kind of seasonality, when should you want to time your treatments to eradicate that population? I've had quite a bit of success with MUSEPs before, but usually those are quite technical projects where you might be doing some coding to try and reproduce a small part of a paper. So usually that's focused on just working a little bit on a very specific technical skill, usually in R. And yeah, so the skills you could hope to gain would be related to deriving models, testing hypotheses with models, get some experience with different softwares, R, LaTeX, MATLAB. I'm really into GitHub right now, so if you really want to explicitly see the kind of if you're interested in knowing what I teach, you can see every one of my lectures, all the assignments, and that'll give you a feel for the types of questions that are interesting to me. But a lot of my work, you can just go to my website, which is easily accessible from the biology or math department homepages. Click on my website and you'll get the link to my GitHub, which has a lot of my materials public now. And yeah, if you're interested in doing any of these projects, then send me an email or stop by my office in the science building. Thanks.
Thank you. This is Matt Rice's eye. Hi, Lynn Zidell.
Hi, I'm Omar. I'm here to introduce you the Marine Nutri-Immunogenomics Laboratory on behalf of Dr. Rice. So the main goal of our laboratory is to understand the functional genomics of economically important fish species which are aquacultured, for instance Atlantic salmon or cod. To achieve this, our research team is focused on mainly in two important parameters which are aquaculturally important. The first one is growth performance of fish, and the second one is the fish health and the welfare. We measure these two parameters using the biomarkers and with the aid of molecular techniques and approaches, for instance gene expression using the qPCR. We also collaborate with the fish feed producing companies to investigate the impact of functional feed ingredients and formulation in the growth performance of fish as well as fish health and welfare. You will be able to learn a lot of trending omics technologies and molecular biology related tools and techniques in our lab. And pursuing a graduate studies with us may help you to enter a career in a university, government, or industrial sectors. You are always welcome to contact Dr. Rice. The email is given here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve Pearcy, yes.
So I'm Steve Pearcy from the Earth Science Department at Morrill, and I'm like my colleague Penny with broad interest from the nanoscale right to the craton scale, the scale of continents, and then how this evolves through time. And I'd summarize the work in the three areas: mountains, magmas, and metals. And what I'm interested in is how do mountain belts form and evolve through geological time? Can we use the magmas within these things to understand the processes of how our Earth evolved through time? And then thirdly, what is the relationship of metal deposits to these various processes? And a lot of the work I do is based in the field, so you'll see mountains and a volcano on the right on the top. Sometimes we look at things under the sea. And in doing that, we look at the relationships between rocks in the field and what's recorded in these rocks and minerals. Then we take samples and various things and look at things such as high-precision geochemistry, radiogenic isotopes, as well as mineral mineral chemistry and isotopes. And I explain it as in one stage we go out and we do the Indiana Jones thing and look at things in the field, and then we come home and play with lasers and ion guns and so on and so forth to really understand the processes at a much finer scale. So, for example, we take all this various geochemical and isotopic information, and then we undergo modeling. So, for example, you can see here this temperature plot. We can use the various data to do thermodynamic modeling, and then after we do that, we come up with various models to explain processes through geological time. A lot of my work is based with NSERC funding, but also work with geological surveys and other government agencies as well as industry partners. And my students have gone on to work as professors. A lot of them work in the mining and mineral exploration industry as well as with federal and provincial government agencies and even nonprofits. So if anyone's interested in my work, please feel free to contact me. And I always have lots of good students in my group, and there's a really welcoming environment for collegial interactions in that group. So, thank you.
Thank you. Leesa Rankin.
Thank you very much. So I'm Leesa Rankin, and I am a plant evolutionary biologist. I teach botany, evolution, systematics, and biogeography in the Department of Biology. And my main research questions are summarized in 3. The first one is how, where, and when did plant species evolve in the neotropics? This is a big question. So, of course, we use specific case studies, mostly in the palm family and with conifers more lately. So in order to address this question, we go to the field. Most of my students, grad students, go to the neotropics, the Caribbean, the Andes, the Amazon. They collect plants, they bring them back to the lab, and we do DNA sequencing with the leaf tissues. So we either use traditional Sanger sequencing or next generation sequencing to infer a phylogenetic tree that looks something like what you have in that picture, where we try to depict the evolutionary relationships among the individuals or the taxa. We also use the fossil record to date or to calibrate these phylogenetic trees in order to infer or to estimate the times of origin of these different species. And then finally, what we do is with this dated tree, we can infer the biogeographical history of the plants on a particular region. So we can more or less try to correlate or to track colonization patterns or migration patterns and try to infer or correlate with changes in climate in the past or with plate tectonic movement. For our second main research question is how can genomics help conserve rare or threatened plants? So these days we have 2 projects on Newfoundland endemic called Brea and also another endemic genus of palm in the Andes, where we're trying to do conservation genomics in order to delimit management units that can inform policy and decision makers on how to better conserve rare or threatened plants. And then third, another main question is how can we use phylogenetic, am I over this time? Oh, okay. So we can use phylogenetic information to inform the assembly of plant communities in Newfoundland. So next year I'll have 2 master positions open. One on the phylogenetic diversity of Newfoundland protected areas, and second on the phylogenetics of palms in the Caribbean. I also have continuously music positions to work on the herbarium. This is a project that we are digitizing our collection of 100,000 specimens, so I always have music positions because we need lots of hands for this huge task. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leesa. Next on the agenda is Mike Morrill.
So we've heard a lot about interdisciplinary things. So what I do is biophysics, which is at the sort of boundary of physics and life sciences. And students in my lab who are sometimes co-supervised with Valerie Booth in biochemistry or Anand Yetharaj in physics, use a big magnetic field and radio waves, so a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer, to learn things about how polypeptides or small proteins can reorganize lipid structures like bacterial membranes or the stuff in your lungs that allow you to inhale, which we call lung surfactant. And the objective of this sort of stuff is to try and generate the background information that people need to work towards solutions for problems like respiratory distress or antibiotic resistance. And the students in my group are also part of sort of a biophysics, an informal biophysics group at Memorial. There's people from biochemistry, chemistry, and physics, and I've listed some of them there. They look at things like proteins and membranes, biomaterials, processes, macromolecular crowding, using NMR like I do, X-ray crystallography, microscopy, and computation for some of the complex problems there. And for students, one of the important things is that they get a chance to present at interdepartmental group meetings, at journal clubs, learn to talk to and interact with people from other disciplines, and we see that as a very valuable skill for real-world problem solving. So to get in touch with any of these people, you can go to the website there, which is easy.mun.ca/biophysics, and follow the links to my 6 colleagues and me.
Thank you, Mike. We should have given you 6 slides since you were representing for 6. Okay, Shanta Yang, you're next.
Hi, so my research is about the movement intention detection for prosthesis control. So this is important because we see when people unfortunately lost their limbs, there is a gap between the neural system and the artificial arm. So it's not easy to put the prosthesis on to control it. We need to develop the interface. The movement intention detection is the core part of this interface. So the bunch of technology we are using, so we list on the left side, they are the wearable sensors, and we use machine learning technology mostly, build models, and to produce the gestures, for example, force estimation, and we also emphasize on the eye tracking technology because we believe the limb monitoring and also the eye gaze monitoring will provide a comprehensive control. We have eye tracking experts here. So the application situation will be prosthesis control, also exoskeleton, also for industry rehab, so lift very heavy things, interaction, surgical simulation, and the skills and also potential jobs. Find me on website. If you're interested in my research, our group will very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanta. Next up, Dawn Vignale.
All right, so my name is Dawn Vignale. I'm a microbiologist in the Department of Biology, and my research is interested in the interactions between microbes and plants. So just like you and I, plants are susceptible to infectious diseases caused by microbes, and these diseases can have a dramatic impact on our forests, our vegetation, and our food production. And so in my lab, we study a group of bacteria called the Streptomyces, which are shown up there. And they're responsible for a disease of potato called common scab, which significantly impacts potato production in Canada, and especially here in Atlantic Canada. And so research in my lab aims to address 2 key questions. First, what makes these bacteria successful pathogens? In other words, what are the characteristics of these bacteria that allow them to infect a living plant and to cause disease in that plant? And one of the particular areas that we're interested in is the production of small molecules by these bacteria that have toxic effects against plants. In addition, we're actively researching strategies that can help prevent these bacteria from causing common scab disease in potato so that in the long term we can reduce the impact of the disease on potato growers in Canada. And so our research is very multidisciplinary in nature. Students in my lab acquire a variety of different skills in microbiology, molecular biology, biochemistry, analytical chemistry, and plant pathology. And the skills acquired are applicable not only to a career in agriculture research, but also to careers in other fields, including the biomedical and pharmaceutical fields. We have lots of research opportunities for undergraduates in my lab. For example, MUSEP and ISWEP positions, summer research projects like what Nicole discussed, and honors projects. And so that's my current research lab and my students that are currently in my lab. And so if you're interested in learning more about research opportunities and the types of projects that you would partake in, my contact information is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Mike Babbitt.
I've tried to summarize my research with this title here, The Invisible Chemistry of Earth Materials. And rather than focus on too much of the questions we're trying to answer, really just kind of paint a story of the journey of what we're doing in the lab group and as part of the research, right? So the title with an explanation. The invisible part of the chemistry is because we're studying trace elements. Trace elements are at such low concentrations that we need to have a series of purpose-built lab materials to be able to clean and purify our reagents to be able to detect them down to low enough levels. So the invisible part, most trace elements we consider as less than 1,000 ppm. We look at trace elements that are down to parts per billion levels, or low parts per billion levels. And by the time we analyze them and dilute our samples, low parts per trillion levels. The tracers are only useful if we can detect them, but they're always useful, right? So that's that part of that journey. In the chemistry of earth materials, so the other game we play is how do we destroy a rock? So one of my colleagues talked about blasting it with lasers. The other way we destroy rocks is by dissolving it in acid. So if we have a solution that we can measure and put through a mass spec, or if we can take it and grind it up into a powder and dissolve it, we can measure it and we can detect these signals, right? So this is just pictures, a little bit cheeky, not of the clean lab that is present yet on Memorial's campus, but one in Germany that we're trying to recreate on a slightly smaller scale under construction, coming up in the near future. So that's the journey that students will take if they join the research group. We go to nature, we take samples. So from the top left to the right, sampling waters along the Ottawa River to look at the signatures of what elements are released from rocks during weathering reactions. In the middle, the student in a geological survey scientist looking at the iron deposits in Labrador, and on the far right, a new master's student looking at the oldest continental rust on the planet. So we answer these diverse questions using these tools. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I saw that lab and I thought, wow, those renovations have gone just fantastic. Okay, I get to talk about myself. That's just great. I'm interested in underwater acoustics and, in particular, applications of acoustics to measure things in oceanography. Underwater, the problem you have is that light only travels a few tens of meters. Radio waves and things like that, same thing, tens, maybe 100 meters. Sound, you can send sound halfway around the world. So if you want to do anything remote sensing or sampling, you have to use sound. My areas of interest, particularly, are kind of, ocean measurements. I love instrument development. The background of this slide is mapping out the intersection between two acoustic beams to select a point in space to sample velocity data in this case. So signal processing becomes a big part of it, solving, how's that signal get back to you? How are you going to work with it? So I end up working with computer models, simulations, get involved in developing the instruments, and then hopefully going out and making samples. I have upcoming projects that involve Doppler sonar for fisheries acoustics, Doppler sonar for turbulence. I love Doppler sonar is a common theme here. Split beam sonar development. So, yeah, split beam is like fisheries acoustics measurements as well, and acoustic temperature profiling. So, lots of opportunities for students looking forward. In a student, I feel like a Ronald Haynes clone here. I'm looking for strong math and physics skills. Computing and coding skills are really valuable. Interest in instrumentation, and willingness to go out in the field for field oceanography. Okay. Thank you. So you'll notice I didn't leave my slide up. I sensibly put in a filler to end. I want to say thanks again to everyone who presented. I've really enjoyed all the presentations. So one more round of applause for everyone, please. This is the research was the end of the presentations of the research forum. We're going to go downstairs, and there's going to be cookies and hopefully tea, and we can chat, you know, if anyone's interested in some of the programs they've heard. There are other activities as part of the research week that you could still take advantage of. I'm looking at all these faculty members who have students. On Friday at noon, we're going to have the 3-minute thesis, and there's still openings for students to enter. $500 first prize. So, you know, you might want to consider encouraging your student to give a 3-minute presentation. Monday evening as well, next Monday, the Department of Chemistry is going to host the Rebecca Laird public lecture. And let me see if I can get this title here. It's Alan Aspuraguzik, Department of Chemistry and Computer Science is at University of Toronto, is going to talk about the materials for tomorrow today. Talking about using artificial intelligence, high-throughput quantum chemistry, and robotics to make advances in materials discovery. Anything else I need to talk about here? Oh, yes, of course. I want to thank Nicole Babbitt and Kelly Foss for helping getting us all organized. Oh, and Melissa as well. Thank you. And thanks for coming out. And let's go downstairs and have some of those cookies. Thanks for coming out. Bye now.